Hey everybody, it's MJ from Just Plain Fun. A couple weeks ago, my friend Cody sent me a link to this auction out in Wyoming, and y'all have got to see the stuff that I won. Right out of the gate, we got this little dude. I think it's kind of in the family with the scrub plane, and I'm pretty sure this is a Goodell Pratt. And if you know different, let me know in the comments, but this thing is more of a hand plane shaped tool. I don't think I know of anybody who's actually using one of these. And apparently, the last custodian of these tools was not just into hand planes, he also maybe did a little bit of leather work. So, this little Derringer looking dude, I believe it is a leather cutter. I think you can adjust this right here, left, right. It's even got the little measurement on there. And then I think this is the cutter. And then I think you can strip leather or cut leather into strips using this thing. Obviously, it needs to be cleaned up, which is sadly the story with a lot of these tools. But if you happen to be in the market for one of these and you want to buy it as is, let me know. Got a couple block planes here. This one is pretty nondescript. I think that's a lower end Stanley, maybe a Defiance or something. Yep, little off-camera cleaning action there. It is definitely a Stanley, and it was when they were using that numbering system, so it's a much later one. Probably not an actual Defiance, but either way, nothing really to write home about. Just another block plane. If you happen to want to experiment with that one or something or clean it up, I mean, you're talking like $5, you can have it. This one, on the other hand, is actually pretty nice. This is a number 65 low angle, and you guys are going to have to forgive me for this crazy reflection off of that chrome. I'm going to set this aside, but it's got the 1913 patent date on it, so it's a good old one, and it looks like it has a lot of potential. Of course, we got to do something about all this crazy rust. So this guy, the previous custodian, must have had really, really good taste in tools, but unfortunately, at some point, they were not being very well taken care of. But the biggest thing on a 65 is going to be the mouth and whether that thing is clean or not. So once we get that outer layer knocked off, we'll find out what we're working with there. But the fact that this turns is actually a really good sign, because if this thing had been sitting rusting for a real long time, that would be locked up. So I'm sure the mouth is probably, well, it seems to want to move maybe. But let's see if we can get this thing cleaned up and figure out what we're working with. I think Simple Green, PB Blaster, WD-40, 3-in-1 oil. I think all of those are good options. Maybe even, did I say Simple Green already? I think those could all be possibilities. But let's try some WD-40. And what we're going to do is we're just going to spray that and we're going to let it soak. And we're going to come back to this one. We've also got this number 6 with a jointer fence on it. And you probably already know that a jointer would be a number 7 or a number 8. So I'm really not understanding the logic of putting a jointer fence on a number 6. But hey, whatever works. So let's talk about that fence here in just a second. But this is actually a pretty decent number 6. I think it was probably stored separate from the other ones just because it's not in as rough a shape. It doesn't have as much rust. It does have some, but it's just not as rough as the others. And this was in a different lot. So same auction, but a different lot. But I think this is actually going to clean up a little nicer. Thankfully, the tote is still intact. It's got a nice, pretty nickel-plated cap here. So, and I mean, it's not terrible. That thing is going to clean up pretty nice. So probably a type 16 there. And now let's talk about this jointer fence, because this thing is pretty nice. It's the number 386 there. It's got the 1913 patent date on it. And it is complete. I know people have reached out and asked, are you supposed to have 2 knobs on this thing? And my understanding is they just came with 1 knob, but you could position it on either side. And so, of course, if you were right-handed and you've got your hand back here on the tote, you would have the option to put the other hand on this knob if that's what you wanted to do. And then if you were left-handed, you were going the other way, of course, you could move the knob back here and put that on the opposite side of the jointer. For you lefties out there, if you're watching this, let me know, do you ever plane from the other side? Maybe if the grain direction is going the opposite way and you're right-handed, you're not even left-handed, but you want to go the other direction. Does anybody do that? Or lefties, do y'all build your bench with your vices on the opposite side? And while we're on the topic of these jointer fences, this right here, this screw is really often broken. It's either broken or missing. And I think it's because of how long it is. And so if it does not have the right amount of pressure, if it has too much pressure put on it during tightening, then unfortunately it shears off fairly easily. I've never actually broken one, but by golly, I've had a lot of people reach out asking me for one, to the point where we've even talked about making a reproduction of them. So, Anthony, if you're watching, that could be a good product for WWII. But really, the main takeaway here is this jointer fence is actually for sale. So if you happen to be looking for one, I think I'm probably going to ask $100 on it and see if I can get that. Not that any of these tools aren't great. Well, maybe that block plane that I showed earlier. But now we're starting to get into some of the, let's say, less common stuff here. This is a big 94, so the largest shoulder plane, as far as I know, the largest production shoulder plane that Stanley made. And this thing has a lot of potential. I know I probably keep saying that, but at least with all of this nickel plating, at least the rust wasn't able to get to it quite as bad. So we just got to get this thing cleaned up and see. I know it's going to lose some of the plating around here. You can see where it's flaking real bad around the mouth. But hopefully this thing will clean up nice and can be returned to service. And as a matter of fact, let's go ahead and pull it apart and just see what it's hiding under the undercarriage. In the undercarriage. Do we do awkward silences in my videos? Not usually. Usually y'all have to listen to me yap, as the youngins say. It is the how bad is it game. How bad is this thing rusted? Is it rusted to the point of pitting? Can the iron be saved? I mean, the thing is complete. It's all there. And with something like this, honestly, I think the best thing to do here is probably going to be to either spray that with a little PB blaster or something. I probably wouldn't soak this in Evaporust. I just don't think that's necessary. But I think if we soak this for a little bit, it'll take care of all that rust. It'll get rid of that, and then we can kind of wipe it out. I'm not sure on this blade. I mean, it doesn't look terrible. I guess we can run that over some sandpaper and see what happens. Or better yet, let's take it back old school and go with an old sharpening stone and see what happens there. Just maybe leaving a little bit more oil on there. How do y'all do this? Because I'm typically using sandpaper. I don't use this sharpening stone a whole lot. And as a matter of fact, it's probably not even flat. But it'll work for these purposes, just to see what we're dealing with for this particular iron. And there we go. That is pretty bad. I don't know what's going on with this daggone reflection. I got too many shiny parts apparently. But that right there is pretty deep pitting. Now that's not to say that this iron can't be saved, but I think it's going to have to be taken back or flattened a whole bunch or something. I mean, there's plenty of iron there left. So it is going to be able to be saved, but it's going to have to come back, I'd say probably about, what, 3/16 of an inch or so. The last one of these number 94s that passed through the shop, I actually picked up for one of my patrons, and I think it sold for $225, $250. Jay, do you remember? I'm sure you have it in your records. So if you're watching, let me know in the comments. But these things do sell for a pretty penny when they're in good shape, because they're just not that common. And then the ones that are out there, a lot of times, unfortunately, are damaged in some form or fashion. And I'll tell you, one of the most common things that you see wrong with these is the mouth. And the closer that I'm looking at this one, I see that this one too does have the little chip out there at the mouth. So, and it's a tiny, tiny one on this side. It's a little bit larger on that side. Now, it's still going to be operational. It's still going to be usable. But unfortunately, that damage to the mouth is going to make it, it's going to drop its value by a little bit. But you can imagine, I mean, shoulder plane, you're still going to have plenty of support for that blade, even with that little tiny chip. But that is all too common. And I think there was just, unfortunately, probably a design deficiency on the part of Stanley where they just didn't make that stout enough. Either that or a previous owner, unfortunately, was maybe trying to take too big of a bite or something, or maybe hit, I don't know, a knot or something. Takeaway time on this one. If you've been thinking about adding a 94 to your collection and you don't mind that really minor chipping on the corner of the mount there, I'm thinking probably 180 is where I'd like to be at on this one. And for patrons, that's $180 pre-discount. If that's something that sparks your interest, you know what to do. It still has a ways to go, but it's already looking better. A little 4-aught steel wool, some oil, just letting it soak for a little bit, and then the razor blade to try to get kind of the bulk of it. It's already looking, what do you think, 50% better? Still got some stuff down here. I'm going to let that soak some more to try to get that out, but not bad. When I was calculating what I thought this lot was worth, and then of course basing my bid off of that, I was not even necessarily counting on these irons that I'm fixing to show y'all. But these are all looking like new old stock irons. So you know I love to find me some new old stock. And I don't know if they maybe had a little light coat on them, but you see how easy that stuff came off. So that's really the ideal. That's obviously a lot better than peeling off some rust and then identifying pitting underneath it. This one is actually kind of funky. It's a V logo, but check out how the V logo is stamped on there. It's like offset really bad. I don't think that's necessarily going to make it worth anymore. If anything, it probably hurts its value, because I know collectors like to have a nice clean stamp, but every now and then you'll run into one that's double stamped. This one is not, but what do we call that? Like an off print, offset, off stamp something. But that is a 2-inch, so if you happen to have a type 11 number 4 or number 5 that you need an iron for, that one's not half bad. And then we got this Sweetheart right here, and this one is coming in at, looks like 2 1/4. So that's actually from a 5 1/2, and that's a pretty uncommon iron of this age to have it be in that good a shape. I mean, have that much life. I think it may actually be new old stock, but that's a pretty uncommon size. And I have another one of these just like it that I picked up at the last MWTCA at the national meet up in Erie. So if you happen to need a nice 2 1/4 iron for, let's say, technically type 12, if you're not too concerned about the Sweetheart logo, but definitely type 13 through 15, and maybe even stretching a little bit into 16. This one is, oh, it's got that little mark on the back, but probably not going to hurt, not going to affect operation. But that one's available. And then we got this number 1 iron, and this one's another Sweetheart. So if you happen to need, it's not $50, it's going to be more than that. And then we've got a Victory. So I don't know if you all know the story around that one. Oh, 2 Victories. So during World War II, at least this is my understanding, when they were doing what we now call type 17, you could buy a Victory iron, and the proceeds from that would go to support the war effort. So that's coming in at a shade under 2 inches. I don't know what's going on there, but it's going to be for number 4 or number 5. And then this one's coming in at about 2 3/8. So that one's also going to, or excuse me, that one's going to be for a 4 1/2, 6, or 7. So it's a nice touch if you want to put one of these like on a type 17, for example, but you can't beat that condition there, huh? More of these irons got a BB logo. This one's coming in at 2 inches, so for a 4 or a 5, pretty common. It does have the date stamp on there, so 3rd quarter 1940, presumably when that was produced. And we actually have another one of these 2 1/4 inch Sweetheart irons. So that's kind of cool to have yet another one. So if the first one, when you reach out and you need one for your 5 1/2, the first one's already gone. Hey, I got this second one, and I think I still have that one from Erie. So I think I have a total of 3 of these. Now, I'm not letting them go cheap, because I know how hard it is to find this uncommon size. I think I had $80 on those pre-discount for the patrons. So if you need one of those, you know what to do. And then last and certainly not least for these irons, this is a T logo that once again is new old stock. And don't be alarmed by all that junk on there, because fortunately it scrapes right off. Now I'm going to have to go back and put a little light coat of oil on there, because we don't want anything forming on that newly scraped spot. I don't think I'm scratching it bad, but there's going to be that tendency for that to rust there. But this one's coming in at 2 3/8. So if you've got that type 10, number 4 1/2, number 6, or number 7, that needs a nice pretty T logo, this one would definitely fit the bill. This is my parting shot on these irons before we move on. I was getting real close to bowing out on this auction, because if you're like me, when you're calculating what you're going to spend, You got to look at what you think it's worth. And in my case, as a flipper, am I going to be able to make a decent profit? You got to account for your buyer's premium, and then you got to think about shipping and all that. So those costs obviously go up real quick. But the best thing was I was not anticipating having this nice of a pull for the irons specifically. So, I mean, of course, there's some pretty decent money there as a flipper. And I don't know if that's weird for y'all to hear me talk about that, but you know, it's part of the business. It goes part and parcel with running a business. You got to make money. I'm stating the obvious here. But my takeaway here is these irons were kind of like the cherry on top that really got me excited when I opened this box and let me know that, yeah, I'm going to be able to make a few bucks off of this. We got 3 planes left, and y'all know I always save the best for last. I'm showing y'all a number 2, so you know those other 2 got to be something special. Make sure you stick around to the end so you can see them. Just like the other planes, unfortunately, this number 2 got left somewhere where some rust, some moisture was able to find it, and the result, of course, is some good old-fashioned iron oxide. Now, I do think that this thing is going to be able to be saved, or maybe I'm just being too much of an optimist here. But the important thing, as you likely know, is as long as it's not cracked anywhere, which I did not see any cracks around the mouth, and that actually looks halfway decent. Just initial run here, this scraper is not necessarily taking everything off. So we might end up having to go with some sandpaper on a granite block and see what all is hiding underneath there. I don't know, maybe it's not too bad. But we're hoping that there's no pitting. We're hoping that this thing is going to clean up nice. And my only complaint, if that's the right word, on this number 2 is that this is not the correct lever cap. So it is a number 2 size lever cap, but it's got that little pimple on there. So we know that that is from some type of off-brand. So we have to guess, do I say assume? We have to assume that a previous owner either picked this up as is or picked it up with no lever cap, and then they went out and found whatever they could find there as a suitable substitute. But we're going to figure out what we're going to do with this one, having that wrong lever cap. Figure out if we want to try and source the correct one. It is a low knob, so we know that it's going to be type 11 or older. The number 2s don't really follow the type study too closely, but at least in terms of high knob versus low knob, that is legit. You can't get caught up with the brass, of course, because they were always that size all the way to the end. As far as I know, they never went with the big ones. There was not enough room back there. Of course, I don't want to get too much oil on that tote there. We don't want to darken it, but at least it's intact, so that's a good sign. And this side, this cheek, doesn't look near as rough as the other one. With that low knob on this thing, there should be, what, a Q, maybe a T, maybe a V logo hiding underneath all that grime. I'm thinking it's probably a V logo, but let's go ahead and hit it and see if we can figure it out. As y'all have noticed, I'm a fan of using the old scraper, using the old razor blade. And that is definitely a V logo. It looks like there's probably some pitting that's going to hang out underneath that even after we get done scraping. Pitting or discoloration there. You're probably not taking that back unless you really get aggressive with some sandpaper, which I'm probably not going to be willing to do. But if the next owner wants to do that, they certainly can. Lots of life left on this V logo iron here. I bet this thing didn't see a whole ton of use. Final thoughts on this number 2. I did a little bit more work off camera. I don't know how much y'all enjoy watching somebody just scraping rust and listening to them blather. So I did this off camera. We do have some pretty minor pitting back there, and probably the biggest thing is this little spot right here. And some of that may come out with a good lapping, possibly. But to be honest, I'd probably just leave it as is. I mean, it's still a number 2, and they're still pretty desirable. This one's just, it's not going to be a $350 number 2, especially not with that cap. But it'll, you know, I'll keep working on it a little bit, and it'll still have plenty of value. It's just, unfortunately, that little pitting there definitely takes away. And we've got 2 left. And you know, if I'm showing you a number 2, wait, I already said that, didn't I? We've got this one. It's a nice 604.5. And boy, that lever cap has seen better days, hasn't it? I mean, this thing must have had like water dripping on it or something. They must have put it like in a basement. But at least the tote's intact. That's a plus. I think the mouth is good. I hope it's good. We're going to go ahead and pull it apart and see what we got. But when I saw this in the picture, wow, and that looks pretty rough too. When I saw it in the picture, all I knew was that it was a Bedrock, and I thought for sure that it was a 604. But then I got the box and opened it, and of course, just like in a previous video you may have watched, as soon as I saw that screw, of course I knew that it was a 604.5, which is always a good day. Look at that. Still got some of the original, still got some shavings from all the way back in the day. This thing was used and then just put away in a wet basement or something. I don't know. But just like the other planes, we got to see what we're dealing with here. This crusty type rust is definitely the stuff that you have to watch out for if you happen to be somebody that has not done a ton of restoration work or cleanup work. If you see something like this at a flea market, something like this, you know that that is a bad sign. So I'm not telling you don't buy the plane, but just be prepared. Make sure you keep your expectations tempered, keep your expectations low, because whenever you see that crusty stuff, well, you old hats that are watching this, you know what I'm talking about. You know that that's not good. But it also depends on how long it's been sitting there too. And I believe we have our answer. See if I can get this thing to focus here. That is some pitting. Now, do I think that it is going to ever affect anything that this plane does? Absolutely not. It will not affect operation at all. But it's definitely there. And I'm having a hard time trying to capture just how deep it goes. This is the same kind of scoop where, you know, maybe there's enough material there. It's thick enough that maybe it could be lapped. And some, or maybe even all of that could be removed. But of course, you don't want to weaken that cheek too much. So how far are you going to go with it? I'm not going to worry about this cleaning the rest of this up, at least not on camera, because you guys have already seen that process. But the iron doesn't look terrible. I mean, it's got this crap up here, but overall, I mean, I think that is probably going to be okay. Might be the same scoop as what we saw in the 94, where it's going to have to come back a little bit in terms of sharpening. But overall, I think that iron is going to come up. This lever cap definitely, I think, is going to end up with some pitting, just like that cheek, because it's the crusty stuff again. But we'll go ahead and let this soak a little bit more, let some of that oil soak into that crusty stuff, and then we'll come back and revisit that. I'm going to hit y'all with one more tip here before we move on to this. And this is especially for the folks that maybe don't have as much experience cleaning these up. When you see that crusty stuff right there on this particular screw, your best asset, your best approach on that is going to be patience. The best thing you can do is go ahead and soak that with a little bit of oil, and whether you want to use oil or WD-40 or whatever it is, but soak that thing all the way around and just let that sit. Do not try to force it. And of course, you know, don't hit it with the pliers and mess up your knurling. But no matter what, the best thing you do is just let that soak for a little bit, even overnight, in whatever your chosen method is, whether it's, you know, transmission fluid or PB Blaster or WD-40, whatever it might be. And in this particular case, that one, fortunately, I'm happy to report, is not locked up. But a lot of times they are. And as a matter of fact, when I first tried to turn that, it was locked up. And that's why I had to take the frog off, because I was like, dang, am I going to have to really do some surgery on this frog? But just something to keep in mind there. If you've been looking for a 604.5 and you like the looks of this one, I'm just going to go ahead and throw down during the video and say 300 is where I'd like to be. For patrons, that's pre-discount. Now, it does have that little scratch right there on the side there, but it's not a crack. I mean, you can see it doesn't emanate past that. And that's as it sits, as is right now. I do 300, and acknowledging that pitting. I mean, it wasn't long ago that these things were selling for 500, 550. So I think 300 is pretty fair. But if it doesn't sell for that, I'll lower the price later. But if you happen to like that one, I know everybody's ready for that final plane, but I did promise that I would come back to this number 65 and see what we were dealing with. we won't spend a ton of time on this. And if you don't want to watch this part, go ahead and fast forward a little bit and scrub forward so that you find the last one. But this 65, I really hope that it does come up nice, because 65 is one of my favorite block planes, and I don't know if it's the wider iron than the 60 or 60 and a half. I don't know if it's I mean, of course I like a low angle, especially in a block plane. But like I said, I'm really hoping that this one is going to clean up nice. I'm hoping that this stuff is going to come off. I can't run the razor blade down into that groove. But so far, I mean, it's not bad. I think what's going to end up happening with a lot of these planes is there's going to be a lot of discoloration, but it doesn't look like the pitting is terrible. So maybe we caught it in time on most of them before the pitting could start getting deep. Last and most certainly not least, we have this nice Type 17 number 5. Woo, that is purty. Just kidding, y'all. It's actually this number 9. And if it breaks your heart just a little bit to see one in this rough a shape that obviously has been unfortunately neglected and possibly got wet somehow, you're not alone. I can promise you, you're not alone. But this particular plane, this part right here, is where we see the worst of the crusty stuff. So there may very well be some pitting hiding underneath that stuff. And I'm going to go ahead and wager a guess that a lot of people watching this video have never actually seen one of these before. I know for me, of course, I've seen them at MWTCA. I've seen them at tool meets, which, by the way, the fall meet is in Bowling Green, Kentucky in September. So y'all should definitely come out for that. And you can see all kinds of tools like this, all the uncommon stuff, or dare I say rare, that you won't see in a lot of other places unless you have the privilege of going and looking at somebody's collection that they've had for a long time. But in case you haven't seen one of these before, or if you haven't seen too many, number 9 miter plane, sometimes referred to, I've heard it referred to as a piano maker's plane. I guess the piano makers used to use these. Kind of sketchy taking this knob off, because you never know what the threading inside there, what the situation is going to be. And this one may prove me, oh wait, never mind, disregard. This is a later one. This is a Sweetheart model, so it's got the screw. For some reason I was thinking that was the older one that actually screwed on. But it looks like everything is coming apart pretty decent, which is a good sign. And then you may recognize this if you've ever seen a number 11, the old belt maker's plane, because that's the same style that they use to serve as kind of a chip breaker. It's not a chip breaker, but it serves that purpose as far as meeting up with the yoke or the Y adjusting lever in order to raise and lower the blade. And of course, because I don't actually have a Stanley number 9 in my collection, I have a couple of miter planes, but they're not Stanley number 9s. So of course I actually want to keep this plane. I don't really want to sell it, but unfortunately I just don't think that right now is the time for me to add one of these to my collection. And it looks like that screw is either reverse threaded, and I've never actually taken one apart before. Yeah, that's what it was. I was going to do that off camera, but I guess it's reverse threaded. Now, for those of you that have had a lot of experience with these, you might be laughing at me going, MJ, what are you doing? You should know how to take this thing apart. But I'm going to be honest with you, I've had one or two of these pass through the shop. I think one of them was a Lee Nielsen, and I don't have a ton of experience with these because I'm going to throw down and say they're relatively uncommon. But it looks like everything is there. Everything is intact. I know I've seen a time or two where there was damage, especially around the mouth, which is all too common, not with just, well, with any kind of plane, really. But overall, this thing looks like it's pretty decent, and we're just going to have to clean it up just like we did with the rest of them. We did some off-camera work here because my shop is just not clean enough or organized enough for y'all to see my bench grinder, for example. So we did use a brass-coated wire wheel to do the hardware like this. And we used a lot of steel wool. We used a lot of elbow grease, Oh, looks like I haven't even cleaned that one yet. So this one's going to go to the brass coated wire wheel. Use a lot of elbow grease, let some stuff soak in oil in order to loosen things up, obviously. The knob, I actually used Renaissance wax, and I have not buffed this out yet. I've actually just letting the wax kind of sit on there for a minute, and if I was really trying to make it shine, of course I would use multiple layers of that. But a lot of this stuff, just elbow grease, 4/0 steel wool. On the blades specifically, used some fine grit sandpaper in order to try to get some of the worst of that off and to kind of bring back a little bit of shine to it. This is actually what we call type 12. So that's a, what, an X logo? Yeah, XY and then AA. So this is an X logo, and it doesn't really technically match this cap, but I'm going to go ahead and say that the number 9s probably didn't follow anything that looks like what we call our type study. Oh, and that blood right there, I mean, is it even really a restoration if it doesn't draw at least a little bit of blood? One other thing that I want to mention on these miter planes is they came stock. I'm pretty sure all of them did. Somebody who's smarter on these than me can let us know in the comments. But I believe they all came with the hot dog. So it was an additional attachment. So think miter plane, lay on its side, clean up miter joints. Use it kind of in a similar vein to what you would a shooting board. And so it would have that hot dog, is what it's affectionately called, as a hot dog. So it attaches on here and it gives you a little handle to push on the side of there. Other than that, we're going to get this little dude cleaned up here, and we're going to see if we can address some of this discoloration. And as a matter of fact, if you know a good technique, not just for my benefit, but for the benefit of the folks reading the comments, let us know if you have a good technique for evening out the patina and dealing with that discoloration. I mean, I know we could take it to the sandpaper, like on a granite block, and run through the different grits and probably at least remove some of that. But speaking of, this is the one major deficiency on this little guy. It does have some pretty significant pitting up here on the toe. I don't know, I mean, there's plenty of material there. I mean, for a plane of this value, it might even be worthwhile to take that and have like a machinist mill off however many thou off of the bottom of that in order to address that pitting. And I feel like there's plenty of material there. This is a little thinner, obviously, at the mouth. So maybe that blows that whole theory. I don't know. Again, somebody who's smarter than me, let me know what you think. But we're going to get a little bit of this oil wiped off, maybe address a little bit more of this, and then we'll put it back together and reconvene. Got some points to ponder here, some more things to discuss, I guess, while I put this thing back together. The hot dog that I just mentioned is missing from this plane, which, from what I understand, is very common. It's one of those parts that the previous owners would commonly take off, not use, and then it would get put wherever on a shelf in a drawer somewhere, and then it would disappear, get separated from the plane. I mentioned this pitting down here and thinking that that was the worst of it. Unfortunately, and I don't want to end this video on a bad note, but that is a crack right there. And you can see the little edge, or where it comes up, it goes over, and then the real telltale sign is right here. It actually does go all the way down on the inside. So that is pretty unfortunate, and as I mentioned, I don't really want to end on a bad note. But honestly, I think that's actually a good thing, because now I have all the more reason to keep it, because I don't think that I'm going to get anywhere near what I think it's worth. Let me rephrase. I'm not going to get what it's worth to me based on what I paid for the auction lot. So I think this one is just going to become a part of my collection, and quite honestly, I'm okay with that. Some other interesting things about this is actually a bevel up, which is the opposite of all the other bench planes, or all the regular bench planes 1 through 8, including the fractionals. They're all beveled down, but this one is bevel up, which I'm sure is by design, and that's so that you can get a nice tight shaving. Of course, you're going to move that mouth as close as possible so you can take a super thin shaving. And then also, I mentioned earlier in the video that this screw, I said that it was reverse threaded, and that is actually not the case. It's not reverse threaded, It's just counterintuitive. So you turn it the opposite direction of what you would necessarily, or what you would think, in order to open and close the mouth. But it is threaded with a regular right hand thread. This area up in the front that I was real worried about, I mean, of course, it's got the discoloration, but it's really nowhere near as bad as what I thought it was going to be based on all of that crustiness. It does have, I don't even know if that would be considered pitting. I guess it would, like a nice big pitting spot right there. But overall, I guess the question is, what do y'all think of my new miter plane? As always, big shout out to all my patrons, past, present, and future.